The Cave of Trials in Bug Fables The Everlasting Sapling is a 50-fight endurance test where you fight wave after wave of enemies to try and reach the end. This is generally saved for the end of the game to try and beat, but I decided to try my hand at beating this thing in a Chapter 4 state, since that's when Neolib first gives you access to it, which is probably for the best because I really don't know how far one could get trying this challenge any earlier. In any case, I'd like to share my build that I decided would work for this mini challenge. Since the Cave of Trials forces you to do 50 fights consecutively with no breaks, meaning you can't change your meta setup in the middle of your attempt or consume items outside of battle, it's important to make sure that the metas you want on are the metas you absolutely need. You may well have different preferences for ideal metas or items, but I thought it'd be wise to keep my build relatively simple. Regarding items, I have a max of 13 and they're all crispy donuts. The rationale behind this is that TP is your most important resource to beat enemies and keep your squad alive, so you're naturally going to want to have a lot of it. If you don't know what crispy donuts are, they're an item that restores 12 TP by cooking a glazed honey with a bag of flour after helping Crispy with his quest. If you're wondering why I'm using these and not something like, say, berry smoothies or queen's dinners, it's because I find both to be overkill, not to mention expensive, and I like the added attack given by the last attack medal since Queen's Dinners also restore HP. I can't really think of any other worthwhile items that are available in Chapter 4 since status buffs last for only one fight, attack items are much less powerful than say a heavy hit from one of your attackers, and HP recovery is covered by V's secret stash if you really need it. Regarding alternatives, Obama Honey is also pretty good to pack maybe one or two of you since they can instantly trigger danger on your attacker, but that's just what I think. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother with anything else. Now, when going into the Cave of Trials, you have two options for attackers that are viable: Leaf or Kabu. Yes, I did in fact say Kabu, and I'll explain why later. For now, you're not going to want to use V because she's best geared towards targeting single enemies, and the Cave of Trials will always pit you against multiple enemies at once. You're going to be struggling a lot more with later enemies without being able to KO them all quickly, and V's only AoE move, Needle Toss, is not something you want to try using when under pressure, and it's not even that strong or effective with it being difficult if not impossible to target enemies that are further in the back. She's not worth it at all, I suggest not even trying. Instead, one character I can recommend using is Leaf. He has Icefall, which is an AoE attack that can hit several enemies at once and potentially freeze them all solid. It's a good move, and you can bundle it with Status Booster if you want to better your odds at triggering the status element. The 4 TP cost also makes it effectively free whenever used alongside Victory Buzz if enemies fall after a single turn. He also has the coveted Frigid Coffin, which should be an excellent option for freezing some tougher enemies like Chopper Bruisers on Beetles. He's, however, poor against enemies with defense, and his best attack hits only once, making it kind of weak. If you're a purist, however, you'll likely only use Leaf though because, technically speaking, Kabu is really not a good fighter here without Understrike, and that brings me to Kabu. So, you're free to disagree with me. I know that entering the Bandit Hideout is technically no longer pre-Chapter 4, but the way I see it, you can't enter the Cave of Trials until starting Chapter 4 anyway, and there's no required fight standing between that and getting Understrike regardless. So I say just get the move, it expands your options, and it means you can also get Chompy for this challenge, which is just free damage. After all, this challenge is difficult enough as is, you may as well take the extra advantages. Especially since you're otherwise probably going to want a full inventory of Queen's Dinners, and I doubt you're going to want to grind that much. As far as Kabu's viability in battle goes, healing like Leaf has only one really viable skill, and it's Understrike. It's slightly more expensive at 5 TP, meaning it has worse synergy with Victory Buzz, and it can't hit as many enemies at once instead of being able to reach at most only 2. However, what it lacks in range and cost, it more than makes up for in power. Understrike hits twice, all the while ignoring all enemy defense. This makes the skill synergize significantly better with extra power, which can be brought on by medals like Power Exchange and Last Attack, making Kabu a very deadly fighter. The added power is also a massive help for later fights, as he will spend less time fighting since enemies will naturally fall faster, and your TP will be exhausted slower. And you can still rely on Leaf for utility by having him freeze enemies that will go down quickly. Defense is also going to be a lot more common than an elemental weakness to ice, so his basic attack will just have overall more universal utility. Of course, pick whoever you're more comfortable with, but I'm just telling you what I found to work. Finally, I'd like to share the medals I used throughout my Chapter 4 Cave of Trials run. Now, there's a good few medals I think are important, and then some others I consider mostly just filler. First off, there's Last Attack and Power Exchange, both on Kabu. These medals can be gotten from the Devourer and the Underground Tavern after finishing Chapter 3. I feel the reason I'm using these medals is really self-explanatory. It's extra damage. Victory Buzz is a medal you can get for submitting 25 discoveries to the library. It's arguably the most important medal you could ever want here, since you're going to be frequently using TP to make fights quicker. Miracle Matter is also being used, and that's equipped to Kabu. You get this for beating Broodmother, which should be done as soon as you finish Chapter 3. The fact of the matter is that you're going to be taking a lot of damage very often as you go through this challenge, especially with Power Exchange equipped to Kabu. And so, you're liable to make mistakes as you progress. If your star attacker goes down, you're in trouble, especially since Kabu is your only reviver on your team. Maybe if you really wanted, you could pack a couple of magic seeds, but I really would not recommend it. You're going to really want the TP to Crispy Donuts carry with them. Strong Start, meanwhile, is actually a medal equipped to V, not for any particular reason, just wanted her to equip something. But this medal allows you to do a variety of different things, like attacking with one bug and switching them into the back. Basically a free extra turn to use an item if your TP is low. It's extremely versatile, you can do a lot with it. It's in the Lost Sands, just before the gate linking to the Golden Settlement. I'd actually probably recommend leaf equipping it though. Kabu struggles a bit with Obama Honey, and you can viably KO 2 on the first turn, not just 1. You'll see an example later. And finally, Spy Spect. To get this medal quickly from the BOSS, challenge the mini-boss Boss Rush and win 3 fights in a row. Unless you have enemy HP and defense memorized, you're not going to want to waste actions and TP against enemies that potentially just barely survive your attacks. It's also just in general a very convenient medal, and you can't spy on enemies you've never encountered yet. Now, for the filler medals, we must start with back support. It's decent, but it's unlikely that the character in back will actually get targeted, so it really won't do much for you unless either you're facing enemies with AoE moves and you can't KO them in time, or you're using Kabu's taunt skill. TP Core is a medal that is not common to activate since battles should be ended quickly, and this medal assumes you'll take at least 3 turns to win. You're honestly probably better off with Meditation since you're likely to have leftover turns by the end of the battle. And lastly, Empower. The extra attack power is nice, but it also drains your TP really quickly when used alongside your other skills. Keep in mind that of course, these medals, while they're not necessarily important for me, they can work very well for you. And they might even be better if you use Leaf as your attacker and not Kabu because, let's say, Leaf is slower at actually knocking out enemies. Then TP Core would be more useful for you. So that's my build for trying the Cave of Trials in an early Chapter 4 state, we'll call it. Now we're going to get into some highlights of my Chapter 4 Cave of Trials run. The first 10 battles in the Cave of Trials were nothing to write home about at all. Most enemies will fall to a single understrike, especially when its HP is low, and your TP will generally hold out just fine. Kabu did faint on the 10th battle, but his low HP just meant that when he comes back after the battle is won, he's primed to hit as hard as possible later. The same case applied to the following 10 battles leading up to battle number 20. Obama Honeys were less than fun to deal with though, since they were just beyond the HP value where they would be OKO, but Leaf's at least able to dispatch them without any issues afterwards. They did last a turn longer than they should have though, since I didn't really plan this fight out very efficiently. After that, I healed since I had low TP, and my Crispy Donuts were better spent later in the challenge because most of the way to battle 30 really wasn't very hard. It goes without saying also, but expect luck to be a factor unless you're going to commit to taunt. I don't, since the 60% chance of Kabu getting hit for being in front isn't too bad, but you may think differently. Also, of course, making obvious decisions like targeting Matter Speeds should naturally be seen as a no-brainer whenever they appear, as I don't know anyone who enjoys being at the mercy of an enemy that can numlock you. They first appear in Battle 23, so make sure you can wipe them out quickly. After Battle 27 though is where things get dicey. Before now, enemies either didn't really have a lot of HP so they could be wiped out quickly, or were easy to freeze. So a single understrike now often won't be enough. Be sure to consider your options carefully from here on out because you're actually at risk of losing now. Now heading up to battle number 40, you're going to start encountering enemies like Zombeetles and Wasps. They're tough, but Kabu's tougher. Just be ready to exhaust your TP if you want to be efficient, since you're otherwise probably going to face issues with reinforcements. If you need to use Crispy Donuts around here, then I'd say fine, especially if you have 15. But this really isn't where I'd say exhausting them would be ideal. Also, it's here that Empower did definitely start becoming useful when you have to deal with multiple enemies with 11 max HP. Just be aware that this can attack your TP rather quickly. Oh yeah, I actually leveled up on battle number 38. I really can't give any specific advice if this happens to you since I won't know your rank or EXP counter, but be aware that you're going to likely rank up at least once as you attempt this challenge, at least unless your rank is just really high. But for me, I was plenty ready to spam my TP move since I just used my last heal for battle number 40. Also a pro tip, enemies that you've never encountered yet don't award you EXP. If you check out the full run after this video is over, you will see that I've encountered enemies that exist in Chapter 4 Sandcastle. This is because originally, I was going to go into this using both last attack medals, but didn't because after the fact, I learned that most people would not be very impressed with this run if I battled most of the bosses in Chapter 4 before doing this because of all the medals they have to offer. And since some Chapter 4 enemies actually reappear in Chapter 7, they still give you exploration points. Just a heads up. Now we're given TP Saver, and you can rest easy now knowing that if you fail from here on out, you're given a new medal that's bound to help you on your salty run back. Defense Exchange meanwhile, I don't care. If you can get Kabu down to low HP, I'd highly advise it, especially before the Deadlanders show up. Lots of moderately strong enemies will start to appear in groups of 4, and multiple uses of your AoE skills will be necessary. Iceball users will be used to this by now, but Understrike users will start to really bleed TP. Around now, I wouldn't hesitate to use Crispy Donuts as needed, especially when you'll start finding yourself dependent on Leaf's Bubble Shield to keep Kabu's danger status safe. Taunt also starts becoming more useful once you start encountering Deadlander Gammas. They're gnarly mini-boss level enemies, but they're stuck with nothing but single target attacks. Taunt and Bubble Shield like Kabu, they can't touch you. I'm sure by now you can understand why preserving TP is so important. Now the encounter with 2 golden seedlings in battle number 48, I'm going to give special attention to because if you handle this fight poorly, your run can die here on the spot. For this fight, you're going to want to have high TP. That much I promise you. Leaf will be your best attacker here since your attack power doesn't really matter much, and Kabu's Understrike flat out won't work. If you're running the build I'm using in this video, make sure Leaf is holding Strong Start before starting. Kabu will need his turn to use Taunt, and Leaf will do enough damage to cut both Golden Seedlings' HP in half by using Icefall twice. You can then Bubble Shield like Kabu and then finish them both off with basic attacks. If you don't think this will leave Kabu exposed, you run the risk of losing multiple bugs to these Golden Seedlings and risk getting wiped out with no way to protect yourself and with HP so low that you're at risk of getting ult healed by a head bonk. My run was only able to continue because I got lucky and the Golden Seedling decided to ram V instead of just finishing her off, so this run was able to finish, but that was closer than it had any right to be. On a somewhat lesser note though, I hear Golden Seedlings have an attack set of 8 when they ram into you, but V took only 4 damage after super blocking when she should have taken 5, so either the wiki was wrong, which at this point wouldn't surprise me, or Golden Seedlings have some damage modifiers that we aren't aware of yet. And since Leaf took 8 damage from a super block when he has absolutely no defense modifiers, I am extremely confused. So I looked at the wiki again to fact check, and the trivia says that they gain +3 charge when taunted. Yeah, that's not extremely cheap, especially when the game gives you no information after the taunt itself has been used until after they attack. Heck, apparently not even the developers knew this even existed. And it's stuff like this that you can only really learn if you either watch my videos or you're on my Discord server, which I'll link in the description down below. Besides that though, the Cave of Trials in Chapter 4 is just about done. After the following 2 fights, I even had a leftover Crispy Donut left, and your reward for succeeding in this challenge is a team ribbon for your beloved Chompy, meaning you can gain TP back from having her attack so long as she does damage. A handy reward, but would I say it's worth doing this challenge? Well, I guess you'll be the one to tell me in the comments down below. If you're interested in seeing this run in full with all my commentary covering the highlights, you can click the video on the screen right now. With that all being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.